Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm 30 years old. I'm an interior designer based in Baltimore, and I specialize in creating warm, human-centered spaces, healing places. But it took me decades to realize that I, too, deserved healing. I didn't grow up in a home filled with comfort. I grew up surrounded by walls where love didn't echo back. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, in a house where love wasn't unconditional. It was conditional on applause, performance, and praise. And all of that praise belonged to my younger brother, Tyler. Tyler was the star of our family, even before he could walk. By the time he hit elementary school, he was already on his way to being the neighborhood's golden boy, athletic, charming, and effortlessly magnetic. My parents, Brenda and Robert, adored him like he was a living trophy. Every soccer goal he scored, every most improved ribbon he brought home, they cheered like he'd won the Olympics. And me? I was quiet. I loved art, light, space. I used to rearrange my own room weekly. I had a little sketchbook where I'd draw living rooms and bedrooms for imaginary families. My world wasn't loud. It was measured, careful, quietly colorful. When I was 10, I spent weeks building a miniature model of our neighborhood, tiny homes made from foam board, walkways lined with toothpick fences, and even tiny trees made from sponges. I entered it into the regional kids' design fair and won first place. I still remember clutching that little gold ribbon in my hands, my heart beating fast because Brenda had promised she and Robert would be there. But that morning, Tyler's soccer game got rescheduled. Brenda said, "Sweetheart, take pictures. We'll look at them later." They never did. And that was just the start. In middle school, I designed a sustainable living shelter using recycled materials for a state project and won a statewide award. I invited them again. But that was the same weekend Tyler had a camp tryout. "He only gets one shot at this," Dad said. By high school, I stopped inviting them all together. I would come home with awards and quietly pin them to the corkboard in my room. The hallway outside that room? Full of Tyler's sports trophies, signed jerseys, and framed team photos. My corkboard? Hidden behind my closet door. My room became my only sanctuary, a little world where my talents and dreams were valid, even if no one outside acknowledged them. I still remember one winter evening, curled up by the heater with a stack of interior design magazines I'd saved up for by tutoring the neighbor's daughter. I'd whisper to myself, "One day, I'll design places where people feel like they matter." But anytime I spoke of becoming an interior designer, Brenda scoffed. "That's decorating, not a career," she'd say. "Tyler's the one with real potential. You should focus on something practical." So I smiled, nodded, and buried my ambition like a secret blueprint deep inside my chest. They never saw me, not really. Not then. Not for a very long time. By the time I was finishing high school, I had built up a quiet empire of achievements, academic awards, portfolio pieces, small scholarships, but none of it ever cracked through the glass wall between me and my parents. The only time Brenda or Robert looked at me with something close to pride was when I was doing something that somehow benefited Tyler. When I got accepted into one of Oregon's top interior design programs on a full merit scholarship, I felt like my chest might burst from holding the joy alone. I walked into the kitchen holding the acceptance letter like it was made of gold leaf. Brenda barely glanced up from her phone. "That's on the east side, right?" she said flatly. "You'll be far from home." That was it. No hug. No smile. No, "We're proud of you." Just geographic distance, spoken like disappointment. That same week, Tyler got accepted into a public state college with a football scholarship. They threw him a backyard party, balloons, a banner that read, "To our star," neighbors filling the lawn, laughter echoing through the kitchen windows. I stood off to the side, clapping like a stranger. Later that night, Brenda pulled me aside and said, "We'll do something for you too, Emily. We just didn't know if interior design school was celebration material." So, I celebrated myself. Quietly. I packed my bags, hugged my neighbor goodbye, and boarded a city bus with one suitcase and my sketch pad. No party. No photos. No farewell dinner. College was tough, especially without a support system. I worked part-time in the campus library and waited tables at a diner on weekends. Between long studio sessions, critiques, and 4-hour closing shifts, I barely slept, but I never missed a grade. My GPA stayed perfect. But it wasn't the grades that saved me. It was a stranger on a bench outside the design building with a notebook full of medical diagrams. His name was Ethan. I had just presented my final project, a community healing space for post-trauma recovery, and while others gave polite claps, Ethan looked at me like I had just invented something sacred. "You think differently," he said, sipping black coffee. "Like you see things the rest of us miss." I didn't know it then, but those words would be the beginning of something I had never felt before, being seen. We began studying together in the library, slowly swapping snacks and secrets. He was studying medical technology, fascinated by the systems that keep the human body functioning. I was obsessed with emotional environments, how a room could soften a person's pain or make them feel safe. Ethan never doubted my dream. When I cried over a harsh critique, he didn't try to fix it. He just said, "You build spaces that matter. Don't let anyone shrink that." He became my person, my safe corner in a world that had always felt so loud and indifferent. But no matter how supportive Ethan was, my family stayed the same, silent or shallow. They visited my campus twice in 4 years, both times because Tyler had away games nearby. When I told them I got a summer internship with a leading wellness design firm, Brenda blinked and asked, "Have you seen Tyler's new dorm? It's huge." I stopped telling them things after that. The day I received a job offer from one of the top firms in Baltimore, I stood in my tiny dorm room holding the phone, voice shaking with pride. Brenda's reply? "Baltimore? That's really far. Are you sure you want to move away from family?" I hesitated, and then I lied. "I'll think about it." That same weekend, Tyler got a 3-month sales internship at a local athletic company. Brenda and Robert took him to his favorite steakhouse to celebrate. I wasn't invited. Back in our shared apartment, Ethan gently pushed a strand of hair behind my ear and said, "Let's go. Let's start over somewhere new." So we did. We packed up what little we had, his diagrams, my sketchbooks, a few plants, and left Oregon behind. We didn't know then that Baltimore would test us harder than anything had before. Moving to Baltimore felt like diving into deep, cold water. The city was faster, louder, more crowded than anything I'd known, but it also felt like possibility. For the first time in my life, I wasn't in someone else's shadow. No more sidelines. No more being overlooked. I was finally free to build my own story. I threw myself into my new job at the interior design firm. Long hours, endless revisions, tight deadlines. But I thrived in it. I had been working twice as hard my whole life. Now, that endurance finally had a purpose. My first big assignment was exciting and personal, redesigning a post-surgical rehabilitation center. The goal was to make the space less sterile, more nurturing. I saw it as a chance to create something I never had growing up, a place where people in pain could still feel valued and calm. Ethan also settled quickly into his new role in diagnostic imaging at a local hospital. He'd come home with wild stories about bizarre x-rays and complex cases, and we'd eat dinner on our tiny balcony, comparing who had the more chaotic day. He was still the calm in my storm. But not even Ethan's calm could stop what came next. At first, it was just a dull ache in my shoulders, especially after long hours spent over design boards or computer screens. I brushed it off. I thought, this is just stress. Just exhaustion. But then the pain spread. My fingers would tingle. My right hand would cramp suddenly. And one night, while finalizing the furniture plan for a children's recovery unit, my right hand went completely numb. I dropped my pen. It rolled off the desk, and I didn't even feel it fall. Ethan was worried. He insisted I see a specialist. I argued at first there was a deadline. There was always a deadline. But eventually I gave in. The MRI results hit like a slow avalanche. Cervical spine compression. The vertebrae in my neck had narrowed over time, years of bad posture, overused strain. The nerves were pinched. If untreated, I could lose permanent function in my hands. The doctor looked at me with the kind of gentleness I wasn't used to. "You'll need spinal decompression surgery." And the sooner, the better. I sat in that cold exam room, fingers twitching, holding the hospital gown like a shield. Everything I had worked for, designing, sketching, building healing spaces, might slip away. That evening, I sat in the apartment, silent. Ethan made tea and sat beside me. I stared at the floor. Finally, I whispered, "What if I can't do it anymore? What if I lose all of this?" He took my hand firmly, like he was grounding me. "Then we rebuild. Together. Whatever comes, we face it." And just like that, I wasn't alone in the fear. The next day, my firm's medical consultant, Dr. Julia Hayes, stopped by to speak with me personally. She'd seen my scans. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Emily, this surgery isn't optional. You've been designing for others. Now you need to protect yourself. I'll help coordinate the team. You're not doing this alone." I nodded slowly. It still didn't feel real. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, I stared at my phone screen in the kitchen, the room dim and quiet. I hadn't called home in months. But now, for the first time in my adult life, I needed my parents. I found Brenda's contact. My finger hovered over it. Then I tapped call. The phone rang 3 times before I heard her voice. "Hello." It was Brenda, unmistakably casual, as if she were expecting a hair appointment confirmation. I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling. "Mom, it's me. I need to tell you something." She was quiet. I explained the diagnosis, the surgery, the risks. I told her the nerves in my neck were compressed, and if I didn't have surgery soon, I could permanently lose the ability to use my hands. There was a pause. A long one. Then, she sighed, a sound full of inconvenience, not concern. "That's unfortunate timing, Emily." My chest tightened. "The surgery is in a few days," I said carefully. "Dr. Julia says I'll be in the hospital for at least 5 days, maybe longer. Recovery will be hard. I'll need some help when I get discharged. Could you and Dad fly out for a few days?" The silence was longer this time. Then she said, "Well, that's the same weekend as Tyler's graduation. We've already booked our flights, and we're staying at a beach house near campus." My stomach dropped. "You're choosing a ceremony over my spinal surgery?" My voice cracked, not with anger, just with disbelief. She responded as if it were obvious. "He's worked so hard for this, Emily. And graduation only happens once." "So, does nerve damage?" I whispered. At that moment, Robert joined the call. His voice was calm. Cold. "Let's be reasonable, Emily. It's a routine procedure. You're a grown woman, you'll manage. Tyler needs us there." I couldn't believe it. I was begging. And still, they were making excuses. "It's not routine to me," I said firmly. "I'm scared. I need you." There was a pause. And then Brenda's voice changed. It turned sharp. Dismissive. "You've always been so independent. Don't start acting helpless just because something didn't go your way." That sentence, it cracked something open inside me. Years of being overlooked, ignored, second to Tyler in every way, flooded back like a storm. "I'm not acting," I snapped. "I'm begging. I'm about to be cut open, and you're telling me a cap and gown matters more?" Robert muttered. "Don't be dramatic." And then nothing. I don't even remember hanging up. All I remember is sinking to the kitchen floor, phone clutched in both hands, shaking. Ethan found me there almost an hour later, my eyes red and swollen. He sat beside me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "They don't get to decide your worth," he whispered. But the pain wasn't just physical anymore. It was betrayal, a lifetime of it, concentrated into a single, cold phone call. The day before my surgery, I received one final call. Brenda's voice was bright, fake, full of background noise. "We just wanted to wish you luck." Then Tyler's voice echoed behind her, half drunk, carefree. "Hey, Mads. Good luck with your neck thing." I hung up before he could finish. I didn't need their kind of support. Not anymore. The morning before surgery, I was lying in my hospital bed, for line in my arm, heart monitor softly beeping. The room was cold, but Ethan sat close, holding my hand between both of his. He whispered things like, "You're brave. You're stronger than you think. We've got this." Nurse Ruby was kind and quiet, moving around the room gently, adjusting my blanket, checking the drip. Her presence brought a strange comfort, more maternal than anything I'd felt from Brenda in years. The anesthesiologist had just finished explaining the next steps when I heard a sharp, unmistakable voice from the hallway. "I'm her mother. I have every right to see her." My stomach sank. "Brenda." Ruby turned to me, eyebrows raised slightly for permission. I nodded. A few moments later, Brenda stepped in, perfectly pressed blouse, pearl earrings, clutch bag tucked under her arm. She scanned the room like it was beneath her. "I had a few hours before Tyler's ceremony," she said flatly. "Thought I'd drop by. But I can't stay long." I blinked at her. She flew across the country for him, stayed in a beach house for days, and now she had a few hours for me? "You flew across the country for Tyler, and now you have a few hours for me?" I said. She frowned. "Let's not start with attitude. I came, didn't I?" I sat up slowly, pain tugging through my neck. "I just wanted you to be here," I said quietly. "Because I'm scared." Brenda rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Scared? You've always made it clear you don't need anyone." "What? Now you're weak, because of a sore neck." I stared at her. "It's not a sore neck," I said through clenched teeth. "I have spinal compression, you've seen the scans. This surgery is serious." Her voice snapped like a whip. "You just love making yourself the victim. Tyler never complains, no matter what. Maybe if you weren't so self-absorbed, people would show up for you." That was it. Before Ethan could say anything, I took a breath and finally said what I'd been holding in for years. "You've never shown up for me. Not once. Every moment that mattered, you chose Tyler. Every time I needed you, you disappeared. And now I ask for help, and you show up just to insult me." Her face stiffened. Her eyes burned. "Don't talk to me like I'm the problem," she hissed. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. The sound cracked through the room. I gasped. Ethan froze. The heart monitor jumped. Ruby rushed back in. "Ma'am, you need to leave now," she said, voice firm but controlled. Brenda tried to argue. She called it a misunderstanding. Ruby didn't budge. Security arrived within minutes. Brenda was escorted out of the hospital, her heels clicking angrily down the hallway. I sat there stunned, my cheek burning, but my chest burning hotter. It wasn't just the slap. It was the last betrayal, the final confirmation that whatever I needed from her, I would never get. As they wheeled me toward the operating room an hour later, the surgical lights above blurred through tears. The last thing I thought before the anesthesia took hold wasn't about fear. It was a quiet, absolute decision. She will never hurt me again. The surgery lasted a little over 4 hours. Dr. Julia Hayes led a hand-picked team, professionals she trusted with her own name, and ensured every detail was precise. The procedure was complicated but successful. My spinal cord was decompressed. The worst danger was behind me. When I opened my eyes in recovery, the light was soft. My throat burned. My arms were heavy. But Ethan was there, blurry-eyed and smiling. "It's over," he whispered. "You did it." I tried to speak, but my voice was barely a breath. I just squeezed his hand. But the days that followed weren't easy. A day after surgery, I developed a post-operative infection, a common but deeply unpleasant complication. My throat swelled. I couldn't swallow properly. Fevers came in waves. I would wake up drenched in sweat, disoriented, crying without sound. The nurses adjusted my medication. Ruby stayed on her shifts as often as she could, even trading with colleagues to be there when I needed someone familiar. I spent 3 nights alone in that room, lit only by the soft green glow of machines. No one from my family called. No message. No visit. No voice to say, "We're thinking of you." On the 4th day, Ruby came in holding a small bouquet wrapped in supermarket plastic. Carnations, cheap and impersonal. She handed me the card. I opened it. "Get well soon. Brenda, Robert, and Tyler." No handwritten note. No warmth. Just hollow words in printed ink. I stared at the bouquet for a long moment, then handed it back to Ruby. "Can you throw these out?" I whispered. She didn't ask why. That evening, Dr. Julia came to check on me. She sat beside my bed, carefully adjusting my blanket, like a mother would. I turned my head away, blinking tears. "You were brave," she said gently. "Braver than most." I looked at her, voice shaking. "It shouldn't feel like punishment to ask your own mother to care." She nodded slowly. "No, it shouldn't. But sometimes we don't get the family we deserve. We get the one that teaches us who not to be." Ethan, meanwhile, took time off work and practically moved into my hospital room. He helped me bathe, fed me when I couldn't lift my spoon, read pages of books I couldn't focus on, made quiet jokes when I couldn't laugh. He reminded me, gently, constantly, that I mattered, that I was not forgotten. My physical therapist, Logan, began visiting once the infection eased. The first day I tried to stand, I nearly collapsed. He held me upright, smiled, and said, "Most people take weeks to reach this point. You're already pushing like a fighter." And I was. Every shaky step I took wasn't just physical. It was a declaration. I don't need their approval. I will heal without them. Brick by brick, I will rebuild myself. When I was finally discharged, I couldn't even carry my own overnight bag. Ethan supported me on one side, holding the bag in one hand and opening every door with the other. He had turned our small Baltimore apartment into a quiet sanctuary, a recovery haven. There were pillows stacked just right on the couch. Soft lighting replaced the usual harsh fluorescence. A tray of herbal tea waited beside a notebook and my favorite sketching pencil, untouched for weeks, but placed like an invitation. It felt like someone had whispered, "You matter here." I didn't touch the sketchpad for days. I couldn't. Logan began physical therapy sessions at home 3 times a week. The movements were small, simple stretches, assisted walks, slow breaths, but each one felt monumental. He'd clap gently and say, "You're tougher than you think." I didn't feel tough. I felt broken, both physically and emotionally. But I also felt awake. One morning, as I sat quietly by the window, wrapped in a blanket, Ethan brought me an envelope. It was from Dr. Julia Hayes. Inside was a letter offering me a remote consulting role, light blueprint review for one of her hospital expansion projects. "This will keep your mind sharp," she wrote, "until your body catches up." I accepted. Not out of ambition, but because I needed to prove to myself that I was still me, that they hadn't taken that from me too. Meanwhile, I started regular therapy with Dr. Brooke Taylor, a trauma-informed specialist. At first, I didn't speak much. I just cried. But slowly, she helped me unravel the years of emotional neglect I'd been trying to hide under success. "They never saw you," she said one day. "They only saw who they wanted you to be. When you didn't fit that image, they punished you by withholding love." That truth hit hard, but it also felt like a release. We worked on boundaries, real ones. I stopped answering their texts. I didn't send updates. When Robert left a voicemail during Thanksgiving asking how my back thing was going, I didn't reply. It was a spinal surgery. But I was done correcting people who never cared to get it right. Instead, I focused on my strength. I took walks along the waterfront, sketching buildings designed for comfort instead of control, softness instead of silence. Places where no one got forgotten in the waiting room. Places I would have wanted to grow up in. By early spring, I returned to work at the firm, still sore, still healing, but sharper than I'd ever felt. Something had changed inside me. Before the surgery, my designs were clean, technical, professional. After everything I'd been through, they became emotional, human. I started focusing exclusively on wellness and recovery centers. Hospitals, therapy clinics, grief counseling spaces. Not just buildings, but experiences. I wanted every room to say, "You're not alone." James, my colleague from the firm, noticed it first. He walked past my new sketches, soft textures, natural light corridors, sensory gardens, and said, "You're not just rebuilding hospitals. You're rebuilding yourself." He was right. Dr. Julia Hayes invited me to co-lead a citywide design initiative, a project focused entirely on trauma-responsive architecture. It wasn't just a job. It felt like an answer to every silent moment in my life where I had wished for peace. And for the first time ever, my name was on the banner. Not Tyler's. Not someone else's.
Mine.
Ethan and I got married that summer. No drama. No fancy venues. Just a quiet, beautiful ceremony in the Baltimore Botanical Garden. Dr. Julia walked me down the aisle. During the toast, her voice cracked as she raised her glass. I didn't give her life, she said, but I watched her fight for it. And I have never seen someone rebuild so much with such grace. I looked around the small gathering. James, who stayed late nights to help finish my designs. Ruby, the nurse who stood between me and my mother. Logan, who toasted with water instead of champagne and whispered, "I told you, you're stronger than you know."
There was no seat for Brenda.
No seat for Robert. No proud parents' photos. And for once, I didn't feel the ache of their absence. I felt complete. Soon after, my firm promoted me to lead interior designer. My white paper on trauma-informed design gained international attention. I was invited to keynote a wellness architecture conference in San Diego. The girl who used to pin awards to her wall in silence was now teaching others how to build safety into space. Back at home, the silence from Brenda and Robert turned into small taps. A birthday text with no signature. A link to an article about Tyler's new coaching job. A voicemail from Robert. "Just checking in, hope you're good." I never responded. I had nothing left to give. It was a cloudy Wednesday when the envelope arrived at my office, addressed not to my home, but to my workplace, like a business transaction. The handwriting was unmistakable. Robert's. I stood for a moment before opening it, already sensing the weight of what was inside. The letter was cold, measured. No warmth. No apology. Just a request. Tyler had lost his job. Bad investments, poor decisions. Brenda and Robert had used up most of their retirement savings trying to help him stay afloat. Now they were reaching out to me. "We need support. Emotionally. Financially. Temporarily. We hope you can find it in your heart to help your family in this time of need." There was no mention of my surgery. No acknowledgement of the slap. No regret for leaving me alone in the hospital. Only expectation. It wasn't even a plea. It was a transaction. Like I was a tool they'd put back on the shelf years ago, now suddenly useful again. I read the letter twice. Then, calmly, I flipped it over. On the back, I wrote 2 words. "Not anymore." I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and mailed it back. No explanation. No justification. Just the truth they had never been willing to hear. I was done. And strangely, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel revenge. I felt free. For the first time in my life, their silence felt like peace, not punishment. I had stopped orbiting around their approval. I had built my own center of gravity.
And it held.
I began spending more time mentoring young designers, especially women. Women who had been told their dreams were impractical. Who had been raised to serve the spotlight, not step into it. Who walked into boardrooms shrinking themselves to be acceptable. I saw versions of my younger self in every one of them. During a mentorship session, one intern, Leah, just out of design school, hesitated before raising her hand. "What if your family doesn't support your path?" she asked. I paused, then smiled softly. "Then build a path they can't walk on." She blinked, like the words hit deeper than expected. That's what I had done. Brick by brick, sketch by sketch, I had drawn a life they could never invade again. Dr. Julia Hayes, now close to retirement, invited me to her home for dinner, a warm space full of books and quiet strength. We did this often, but this night felt different. Over dessert, she finally said it. "I'm stepping away from the practice. It's time to rest. But before I go, I wanted to tell you something important." I looked up from my plate, unsure of what was coming. She reached into her bag and pulled out a city document, signed and stamped. "You've been named lead on the city's new trauma-resilient design board. I fought for this because you're the only person I know who designs with both precision and pain. That combination saves lives, Emily." I couldn't speak. Years ago, I had begged my own mother to just stay with me during surgery, to show up in the smallest way. Now here was a woman, no bloodline, no obligation, entrusting me with the city's future healing spaces. Not because I begged, but because I earned it. And then came the moment I never saw coming. I was speaking at a conference in Washington, D.C., presenting on recovery-centered interior design. After my talk, as I stepped off stage, I spotted a familiar face near the back of the auditorium. Tyler. His posture was unsure. His clothes tailored, but they didn't hide the slump in his shoulders. He didn't approach right away. Later in the hallway, he finally spoke. "Hey, that was incredible. I didn't know you were doing all this." I nodded, calm and unmoved. "You never ask." He shifted awkwardly, eyes down. "I didn't know Mom hit you. I didn't know how bad it was." I looked at him squarely. "You didn't want to know. You were too busy being celebrated." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to soften it. I didn't owe him comfort. "I hope you figure yourself out, Tyler. But I'm not your lifeline."
Not now.
Not ever. Then I walked away. My heels clicked against the polished tile floor. I didn't look back. A year after that conference, I stood at the construction site of the city's newest trauma-informed recovery center, a space I had designed from the ground up. The glass exterior reflected sunlight in a gentle, golden way. Inside, there were no sharp edges, no cold white walls. Instead, curved hallways to soothe anxiety, natural lighting to reduce depression, sensory gardens where patients could walk barefoot on grass, not linoleum. This building wasn't just a project. It was a manifesto, a quiet, beautiful rejection of everything I had grown up with. I didn't build it to prove Brenda or Robert wrong. I built it because I had finally proven myself right. City officials stood beside me for the ribbon cutting. Reporters took photos. One elderly woman, soft-spoken and frail, reached out and gently touched my hand. "Thank you," she said, "for thinking about people like us. No one ever does." I blinked quickly to keep the tears from falling. "You're exactly who we designed this for," I whispered. That evening, I returned to my office. A calm, light-filled space filled with blueprints, awards, and framed memories. But not of my childhood. Not of family barbecues or Tyler's trophies. Instead, the shelves held a photo of James and me, laughing over a late-night mock-up. A picture of Logan giving a thumbs-up during a site tour. Ruby, standing in scrubs beside a wellness pod she helped test. A candid of Dr. Julia, holding her coffee, mid-laugh. Ethan, beside me in a hard hat, both of us smiling like survivors. This was my real family. The one I built. The one that chose me without conditions. I picked up one last photo. It was from our firm's annual gala where I had been honored as Architect of the Year. Yes, they still use the term loosely for interior designers who transformed public spaces. In the photo, I stood at the podium holding the award. Ethan's hand rested proudly at my back. My smile?
Wide.
Unforced.
Real.
Dr. Brooke Taylor had once told me, "Healing isn't the absence of pain, Emily. It's the ability to live beyond it." And I finally understood what she meant. A few days later, I received another letter. This one handwritten in neat, delicate cursive. Brenda. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a single message. "We miss you.
Come home."
It's not the same without you." I didn't finish reading it. I didn't need to. They had been given so many chances to show up when it mattered.
To be kind.
To protect. To see me. They made their choices. And I had made mine. I tore the letter in half, dropped it into the recycling bin, and turned away without a second thought. On the anniversary of my surgery, Ethan and I visited the healing garden at the recovery center I had designed. The very first space I created after I came out of the hospital, still fragile, still angry, still grieving. A patient sat on a stone bench near the fountain, eyes closed, breathing deeply. When he noticed us, he smiled and said, "This place makes me feel calm, safe." I turned to Ethan, who was holding my hand. I squeezed his fingers and whispered, "That's all I ever wanted, you know. Not revenge. Not even their approval. Just peace." He kissed my forehead and said, "You built it." And he was right. I didn't forgive them. I didn't send messages into the void, hoping they'd change. I let go of the need to be loved by people who only knew how to compare, dismiss, and disappear. Instead, I poured my love into the life I created, into spaces that heal, into people who show up, into quiet moments of safety, honesty, and connection. I stood taller, moved freer, designed deeper, not to prove them wrong, but because I had finally proven myself right. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt ignored, unseen, unloved by those who should have protected you, know this. You don't need their permission to build a life you're proud of. You are allowed to succeed without them. You are allowed to walk away. The blueprint is yours now. Draw it your way.